Welcome to AYP Live, the live discussion series from Aberdeen Young Professionals, where we're going to be exploring the big questions facing the next generation of business leaders. Today, I've got two brilliant guests who bring very different but perfectly complementary perspectives. I've got Edward Pollock, who's a driving force in innovation and entrepreneurship, known for helping people turn ideas into real businesses and making sure digital transformation isn't just a buzzword, but something practical. And I'm also joined by Steve Johnson, who is a well-known supply chain and contracts guy who's spent years making sure businesses don't get burned by bad deals. Steve knows what procurement teams really look for when they're choosing suppliers, and more importantly, what they won't tolerate. So together, we're going to explore how you can go from idea to invoice, setting up a business, scaling smart, and winning contracts without losing your shirt. So let's get into it, and we'll welcome both Steve and Edward onto the show.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, guys, how are we both doing?
Good, thank you.
Very good, yes.
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us. So, Steve, just want to tell us a little bit about, we'll start with you. Just want to tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, hi, everybody. So Steve Johnson, I run a small consultancy, Paratus Commercial Services, and our reason for being is really to help small businesses and growth companies be more commercially aware. So when they've gone through that program of identifying products and services, how to build, how to sell, how to build up your supply chain, when they get out to try and win contracts, we support them in the things to look out for and helping guiding them through qualifying maybe onerous terms and conditions, etc. And I'm also, as a group of associates, we work with larger companies to basically try to encourage more productive contracting regimes, as opposed to these are our standard terms and conditions, take them or leave them. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steve. And what about yourself, Edward? Do you want to introduce yourself to the viewers?
I will. Thank you so much. So I'm Edward, and I guess my exciting day job is to try and accelerate the most exciting startups. My main title is Startup Acceleration Manager at the Net Zero Technology Centre. So these days, that's about finding some of the UK and Europe's most exciting energy technologies and taking them through that process of, well, you've got a technology that's maybe in the lab being developed, but actually getting it out into the real world, having a market, understanding who your customers are. So through the training that we deliver, through the connections to partners, my day job involves coaching a lot of startups, supporting them. And before that, I got to do that at Robert Gordon University as well. So lots of lovely startup activities, lots of training, lots of overly enthusiastic exercises and workshops, I'm sure, for the startups who've been through it. They dread the big foam dice and the wheel of names, but it's all about trying to get more exciting businesses out there into the market is my mission for being.
Excellent. Thanks very much for the introductions, guys. I was wanting to kind of split up my questions into various sections. I thought we'll look at the journey for especially those that are AYP members that have maybe started up a business, for example, and looking to get that initial guidance, especially from both of you with your own experiences. Edward, if I could start with yourself, when someone's got a great idea for a business, what's the very first step that they should take to, say, turn it into something real?
Great question. There's lots of ways to go about this because I think a lot of startups jump into two sides of the coin. One, they either jump into a lot of action, but it's not really taking them anywhere. So the first thing they tend to do is create a website, create a Facebook channel, create, some marketing materials, but without actually really knowing what the product is. Now, that is a really nice first step and it is action. But what's probably more important is understanding what your business is really trying to do. So before you go too fast into launching something and getting something branded up, taught to customers is the thing that all accelerators will probably tell you about, is to really nail down what is it that this business is trying to achieve? What is it that I'm solving? So really try and understand what it is that the market is asking for, where the gap is, where the ideas come from. Is it a good idea? What exists out there? So it is important to take action because I know for myself, I'm sitting there brewing dozens and dozens of business ideas that I'm not taking action on, but it's important to really make sure that the business is useful. But then as you're understanding from customers, the second challenge they face, sometimes startups jump too fast, they launch something that's not the right thing, they get demotivated, and then it kind of dies a death, even though they've kind of had that first wave. The second thing, though, is that you don't need to analyze everything. Sometimes startups then feel like they have to find every single possible customer and learn every single possible competitor and know the market inside out, and then face this wall of I'll never know enough. So there's this fine line between rushing and trying to launch everything too fast, too shiny, to analysis paralysis, overanalyzing everything and never taking a step. So I would say the first step is really talking to as many people as you can, understanding what the market's all about, understanding, is there a space for my business? And then hopefully through those conversations, you'll find lots of people who will help open doors. But trying to have those conversations is probably a great first start.
Yeah, no, that's great. Because that probably falls very nicely onto that question I was wanting to ask yourself, Steve, was like, from your perspective, what do new suppliers get wrong when they first, say, approach a bigger company or a procurement team?
I think the main difference, Ross, on that is that small companies pretty much are very able to make decisions, take risks and manage them, because as a small size, it's just one or two people. It could be a small handful of people, and they're all closely knit and they make decisions. And as Edwards was saying, sometimes they might go a bit too quick. There aren't a lot of checks and balances because the emotional contract they've all got with each other is driving forward. We really want to make this happen. And with very large organizations, they have lots of resources, but lots of resources means decision making can take time, because you might have someone in another part of the world or another stakeholder that might need to sign something off and as an approval. And often what I'll see in the contracting environment is a lot of energy at bidding time when the tender comes out and would you like to actually propose something, and then the delay in getting a decision and a contract award. And it might just be because of the processes of a large organization. There's a lot more checks and balances to do. And I think sometimes that frustration works the other way, where large organizations, their processes might say you've got to have all these ISO registrations, and if you don't get to the next stage. But small businesses sometimes are not ready to go through for exactly the issue that Edward was talking about, was at what stage and where do you spend your money to qualify. And I think sometimes it's on both parties, is just to understand that if you're working for a large organization, you might not be on their radar as much as they are on your radar. And it just ties in exactly as I was saying, as Edwards was saying, it's understanding the market, understanding the players in the market, and understanding who fits your business today and who's going to fit your business in the future, and maybe map that out and just understand the fact that not everybody is going to be excited about your new product if they don't know what it is and they don't know what the value is to them.
That's a really good point, Steve, I think, as well to make, because I think you can be very excited about your service or your product, but then you might get disappointed if you walk into a room and somebody goes, so what?
The very words.
And then it can deflate you quite quickly. So, I mean, I was to ask both of you, following on to that, I mean, how important, this is quite actually a common question that we've seen in AYP over the years with like young entrepreneurs. How important is it to look professional early on? Can, say, scrappy startups still win contracts? If I could put that to yourself first, Edward.
I think it's slightly changing, if I'm honest. So I think if you'd have asked me a little while ago, my generation, the Instagram aesthetic generation, is a little bit of look over substance. We want everything to feel really polished. So you would feel like I need to have the most perfect logo. I need to have all the perfect materials sort of read up. So professionalism would be super important. Not to say that professionalism isn't still important, but I saw, I think there was a sort of young 17, 18-year-old entrepreneur who was building a business. I think I saw their journey online, and they were in a call with an investor. And instead of being the most polished presenter, they were really honest and casual. They're sat there with their hoodie, middle of coding, saying, hi, so this is what we're building. We really had this issue. We're working through this. And it was really authentic and really confident in what they were building. It wasn't the most polished. It wasn't the most brand ready style. They weren't following everything exactly to the letter. So I think professionalism in terms of the look and feel maybe isn't as critical, but as you grow and you develop, you will need to get that professionalism. But in those scrappy days, I think what's more important is your confidence and your authenticity. Because if you're not going to get it right, even when you first have those conversations, no matter how professional you think you're being and how much fancy corporate language you think you're using and generic ChatGPT buzzwords, From the other side, people might see through that. What's more important is that they can see your passion. They know why you're fighting for this. They know that even if you've not got something quite right, you're going to be able to be the one to take it forward. So I would say that confidence and clarity is important, and that sort of definition of professionalism maybe slightly tweaking, but always that respectful style, that kind of respect to the other person that you're talking about is super important. But in terms of look and feel, I think that's evolving a bit.
Mm-hmm. Great. And what about yourself, Steve? Because obviously you've seen it like the other side of the fence as well, from being in management positions in the supply chain departments. I mean, do you think that this professional element, or can scrappy startups, can they still win?
Yeah, I would. That's a great question, Ross, because I would say that throughout my career, I've probably, just because of the way that I'm probably built about trying to support, and if I see a good idea, if I see an unpolished but authentic pitch, I will personally do my best to support them during the conversation. And there are some customers who would just probably, I use the term generally, but would enjoy the putting somebody under pressure when they're pitching. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I do with some of the training and the workshops that I do, I've got a bit of an amateur dramatics kind of history. So I will role play the customer who is going to put you through the mill, but if you convince me, you'll get the business. And to the other end of the scale, I play the customer who's just, oh, I love it, it's great, but you're never going to get an order. Mm-hmm. And it's just to experience what that feels like so you can see the signs early. But as Edward was saying, authenticity, knowing your product or service, and being able to say I don't know, but I will come back to you, mm-hmm. as opposed to trying to, I guess, BS your way through problems. Because if you actually say something along the lines of, that's a really good question, it's not something I've thought about, but I'll come back to you with it, is a lot better than I don't know. And it's a lot more better than trying to waffle your way, because you might be pitching to a technical expert who themselves might not have an awareness of the commercial environment that you're operating in now, or you've got someone who's heavily commercial who really wants to get you through but doesn't quite understand. So there's no there's no one size fits all, I guess, is the main message here. But it's do your homework as much as you possibly can, but authenticity wins every day.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've also see it from like my line of work as well. I think if you've got an authentic individual in front of you, you do sympathize if there's areas that they didn't know, and then you're more open to, help them, like you say, Steve, as well, to kind of get across, like, because you might be interested in the product, you might be interested in it might just needs a little bit of polish. That's all it maybe needs. So you're more than willing to help them. So it's good to hear that still happens. And I mean, the next section I was really wanting to kind of speak to you both about as well, which is something that I know that a lot of young entrepreneurs go, oh no, is about contract, right? And I like to class this bit as like contracts without the headaches. So Steve, what's the kind of single most common clause in contracts that you feel small businesses completely overlook, or possibly, shall we say, regret later on?
One of the things I do in the workshop that I run is there's a session on terms and conditions of contract where I give everybody a card and I say, write something that you buy and sell. Mm-hmm. And then I bring up the 30 or 40 most common contract terms and conditions that do catch people out. And then we draw a card at random. So I've got the technical expert in the room. And what it highlights is it depends on the scope and the product or service as to which terms and conditions of contract might be the more serious ones, the ones that might be, you can accept them, but they're fairly low risk, or they're high risk. But the main cluster, if you like, is your obligations and your liabilities and indemnity regime, which is basically, yes, you've got a great product or service. We see what it does. However, there's a risk. If there's a risk attached, a customer will want the supplier to take a lot of risk, and the supplier will be needing to manage that risk. And one of the things about the entrepreneurial world is we talk about this race to be second or race to be third. So it's like, I've got an innovative product or service, right? Who else has done it? Well, no one else has done it, so it's innovative. So that in itself introduces risk. So the usual response is we'll come back when it's proven. And then it's like, well, then it will be proven it won't be innovative. So that's a totally different commercial regime. but you don't want to upset the client by looking as though you're pushing them into a corner.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if something's being tried for the first time, there will be risk. And all you can do is you can do your tests, you can do your verifications, you can do your samples, but there is still going to be a risk. And I think the customer will want to protect themselves, and the supplier, the innovator, will actually be very, very keen to get their product or service seen. Therefore, they might accept things that they don't know what they're signing up against or signing up to. So, for example, your obligations, if something goes wrong, the point at which you raise it and who's responsible and what happens if something goes wrong. And the thing that I would say absolutely to avoid is uncapped liabilities. And because what uncapped liabilities, usually there's a cap on liabilities, which basically said, if the whole world went wrong, there is a cap on your liabilities, which is no more than the value of the order. An uncapped liability basically means, doesn't matter what it is, we can come to you. And once you've signed it, and this is a key point that I would like to make, that when you are a business, so if you're a consumer, you have the Consumer Protection Act, which is in place to allow that even if you're a lawyer, as a consumer, you are protected by law to know nothing about the law, to know nothing about contracts. So you've got the right to, oh, I don't like it, I've got 14 days to take it back, and the supplier has all that responsibility. As a business, even if you are an individual small business, you are a legal entity as far as the courts are concerned. So the courts will just say, well, you signed it, there's nothing we can do about that, because the court will recognize a small business as being exactly the same as a multinational. I hope that answers the question. It's quite a broad, subject matter, but they're the key things to look out for.
I think that's what obviously a lot of entrepreneurs need to realize as well. If depending on obviously in different sectors, there can be huge liabilities if they were not aware of that clause as well. And I mean that kind of follows on to what I was going to ask yourself, Edward. I mean, have you personally ever signed something that you wish you hadn't, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, no, I probably should have went to some of Steve's sessions before. And I'd say back in my student days, I was a bit of a bold, ambitious entrepreneurial type. So I had this bold idea, I think it was second or third year, that I was going to put on a business ball for all the business school students, because I think the nurses had theirs, the architects had theirs, we didn't have one of our own. So I'd worked in a hotel at the time, so I was like, I could do this. I know lots about events, I'll figure this out. So I went into my work and got this contract to book out this venue, 3-course meal, wine, all this sounds really exciting. Got completely caught up in the excitement of planning it until I got the agreement through. And I was doing it through kind of the student union, but you're doing it on your own back. It's not your own legal entity. You're essentially a sole trader. So there's no legal entity to sign the agreement. So I got this agreement through, which I signed happily, book the date, book the venue, let's get everything sorted. Except what I hadn't realized was there was a payment terms of 30 days before the event was 100% of the number of participants you had to pay, which I calculated of what I'd put on the contract was over £15,000 that I would be personally liable to pay. And I hadn't sold a single ticket, hadn't put a single poster up, hadn't asked anyone if they wanted to go to this event or not. It was just my own little passion project. I made a couple of amendments. One was I managed to try and lower the minimum numbers so that 15K came down a bit, so that instead of the 350 tickets that I thought I was going to sell, I was like, could I just get it for 100? And then they're happy to take more money. So that did help out a little bit. I couldn't adjust the payment terms, although I asked. But thankfully, when we did sell the tickets, they did sell out within 24 hours, but it was also chaotic because then I had a lot of people unhappy because they couldn't get tickets and they hadn't bought with their friends, and I had to get the room extended and the contract didn't allow for that. And I had to get a different room in the venue. So I had to renegotiate the contract. So it did all come together in the end. But I guess my lessons learned are, one, for early stage founders who are passionate, don't let your passion run away with you. Two, payment terms, always figure out how the cash works. And a second mistake I made with that venture was that I had calculated all my costs for the booking fees, but I hadn't realized that I think it was PayPal or something like that had a 30-day post payment. So I thought it was coming off every single ticket, and it turned out it wasn't. So there was, I think it was 530 tickets got sold and about £2.50 or something each. So it was about £1,000 bill that rocked up after the event, 30 days. I'd already packed everything up and had a great time posting my Instagrams, all done and dusted. Thankfully, I did have a contingency that was in theory for next year's event, but it went on the fees that I hadn't calculated. So definitely payment terms, checking that you can negotiate if you can negotiate. And back to my point, test the market, find out if people actually want what you're selling before you hold yourself liable or sign agreements that you couldn't have paid. Because I can assure you, I definitely could not have paid it if it had come due.
And that happens with established businesses as well. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I had that very scenario with a fairly, I won't mention them obviously, but somebody who I've done work with before in the hospitality area, and they'd got a very, very exclusive hotel and couldn't fill the numbers because of there was a conflicting event that people looked at their rights to cancel with you didn't match the right to cancel of you and the event host, the venue, and that was that piggybacking of risk to make sure it happened. So that's left the guy exposed. And unfortunately, he's in the same boat because he'd signed it. So yeah, easy done.
I know, because I mean, I don't know if there's any of the committee members are watching, because sometimes I don't like to be seen as the dad of the group sometimes as well, because I'm just trying to give them the benefit of experience of organising AYP events over the last few years too. And, you don't want to curb people's enthusiasm, but it's just obviously make people aware of the pitfalls, especially when you're doing events like that, and we've obviously got our ball and everything, which, it can be 250 people, etc. And it's things like little elements in a contract can, really come back to bite you. And I mean, if I can ask you both this question as well. I mean, if you had to, I mean, I think you've answered at least probably an element of this anyway, Steve, already. But if you had to give young professionals 3 very quick red flags in any contract, what would they be? I'll start with yourself with this one, Steve.
Red flags really are if you have using the example of a venue or a customer, any. So your venue would be your supplier, and your customer would be the people who are going to buy your products and services. Rely on your gut for if it doesn't feel right, go seek the help. So a lot of small businesses, self included, got a network of lawyers and contracts people and technical specialists that I work with. And all I say to people is you don't need to have an in-house lawyer, but you need to know when you need a lawyer. You don't need to have an in-house somebody, when you need one, and then work with businesses of a similar size to you and a similar set of values and beliefs to work with you. But if your gut is telling you something isn't right, park it and do some groundwork on it. I mean, that would be one of the main things. And if you feel as though you're under pressure to sign from the customer or the supplier, that is a red flag. If they're saying, oh, well, if you don't, you'll lose it, use it or lose it, and all these kind of things, unless it's actually sounds like a genuine scenario. But if it just sounds like pressure, there's a good chance that you've got to deal with that as a red flag. Yeah.
That sounds like when my wife handed me the laptop to pay for the holiday. She goes, just sign that. Pay for
that's actually not a bad thing. Buying a house, buying a car, booking a holiday, they're all emotional purchases.
Yeah.
And most people will spend hundreds of thousands of pounds buying a house from a drawing. And then when they move in and find out that the doors don't shut, they're like, oh, okay, it happens.
And what about yourself, Edward? What kind of red flags would you want to kind of highlight to the viewers?
Yeah, for startups, the thing that comes up often is your intellectual property. So whatever your agreement is, most times when you're working with a supplier or even an employee or even a contractor, you're going to be sharing knowledge between each other. So especially when you're a startup, if you've got something novel, it can be simple things like even just your brand and your kind of logos and trademarks and things. But especially if it's something technical that you've invented, or even your know-how is technically a piece of intellectual property. A lot of startups don't consider that, but Coca-Cola, famously, it's just a secret recipe. There's no patent for Coca-Cola's recipe. It's internal know-how. So be aware of what you're agreeing with in terms of that. Payment terms, as I've spoken about, making sure you've got some decent terms on that one and try to negotiate them if you can. And then I guess sometimes things like exclusivity can come up in contracts. So what are their expectations of you, and how much can that limit you? Especially, startups in my field of work are often looking at field trials. So that is, I've got a piece of technology, I really want to work with this big industrial partner. It's so hard to get these trials. I want to try it on their site. Really good. But, if they're starting to lock you into exclusivity, all of a sudden, if they choose not to work with you, or the trial doesn't go as well as you think, how long are you locked in, or how much can you share with other partners, or is that information sealed off? So yeah, I would say have a look at your exclusivity, your payment terms, and consider that for your contract.
That just reminds me something now, Edward, is have a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA confidentiality agreement with everybody that you speak with. If they have a problem with an NDA, that's an early sign as well, because they should be used to them.
Yeah. No, that's great advice, guys. And I mean, I think once you moved on from doing the, like looking at contracts, but then look at the element of budgets, isn't it? Is the next kind of step that you want to have a look at, and how can we compete with our, big corporate budgets that our competitors may have? Edward, if I can ask you, startups don't have, marketing budgets like big multinationals. So how do you go about getting actually noticed in comparison,
Good question. I'd say generally two types of startups that sell products or services to people, business to consumer, or startups that sell products or services to businesses. I guess the easiest thing is figure out where they are to start with. What are they looking at? What are they reading? What are they interested in? Where are they congregating, whether that's events, social media spaces, contacts, things like that. For business to consumer, again, in that space, look at influencers, look at people outside your network who could be amplifiers to try and get some attention, and try to think of, especially nowadays, the quirky ways that you can grab people's attentions. I mean, the examples that come to mind, Brewdog at very early stages had some really bold, wild marketing campaigns. Richard Branson, when he was launching Virgin, had some really bold ones. The one I always like is Airbnb. When they were setting up, they went to the Democratic National Convention, and they were trying to encourage people to Airbnb their properties. So they created 2 mock cereal brands. They just branded up some cardboard boxes, and it was Obama versus John McCain at the time, I think. So they had Obama O's and Captain McCain's, 2 different types of cereal, and they were handing them out to lots of people, and they were promoting the breakfast side of the bed and breakfast. So relatively small, but they actually got a lot of marketing and a lot of press attention from that. And I guess these days, there is a different style to how people are promoting themselves. So look at, even in corporate world, Ryanair's TikTok account, which I don't know if you've seen it, but it's, a hilarious new style of communicating with memes and funny jokes attached to it. They're really creating a corporate personality. So all of these things are relatively inexpensive, but they do take time, but it's worth doing that to stand out. And I guess in the business to business side of things, this is where your LinkedIn and your professional brand can come in. And that, again, doesn't always have to mean the most polished. It means having, I guess, thought leadership, being recognized in your space, being in the right, engaging in comments with the right people. So for example, if I was trying to encourage, I needed connections in the energy sector to talk to my startups. So simple things that I would do would be to find posts on LinkedIn with key influencers in the organizations I'd look for. I'd be commenting on their posts, and maybe like later on I'd add a connection request. I'd then drop them a message, and then I'd use that information to say, oh, I saw you at this recent conference, or we were at this conference. Or I'd go through delegate lists at conferences and find the key people and use that as an opening to say, we were just recently at the conference, I didn't get a chance to talk to you. It'd be great to connect. And kind of all of that is in most cases free. So building the personal relationships on the business to business side, I think, is so important. Business to consumer, you need a mass market appeal. You need lots of people to be able to see. So you're looking for lots of eyeballs and lots of connections. So getting email addresses, etc. Business to business is a lot more relationship driven. So you really do need to try and start targeting the right groups and the right customers. But again, without spending a penny, you can get a decent way through those means.
No, great advice. And I mean, like from the other side as well, Steve, when you're been evaluating suppliers, what makes a small business stand out against the established big boys?
Yeah, it's interesting just because I whether if I'm selling my services into a business, I'm trying to envisage what might make them tick. And just on the back of Edward's point, I'm aware that I'm in a what's the right word? My peer group often will be seen as maybe senior in large organizations and very set in their ways, who just don't, some do, some don't get the new ways of marketing and materials and TikTok and Instagram, etc. And what I tend to do is I surround myself by a whole range of age groups and specialities. And if I'm going into an innovative new business, I will work with one of my associates who works in that space, and I'll just say, can you be my interpreter? And then we'll create something. And I think that's really key, because as somebody from a heavy mechanical and operational background working in commercial and contract relationships, I will see a supplier who will come in who will just want to talk technically. This is really good. This is really shiny. It's faster and better than all the competition. And I think you mentioned it yourself, Ross, earlier. It's like, well, why would I be interested in that? And the key areas for me are, does your product or service help them manage or reduce risk, whatever that might be to them? Does it help with their production of whatever they do? They either improves their quality, or it means you're doing more of the stuff that's revenue generating. My service will take away the pain of the stuff that kind of wastes your time. And then you've got the various type of costs. And the big challenge for new startups is, if it's innovative, is it going to create something within the customer's processes that they have to, and they'll just say, oh, I'd love to use it, but I'm going to have to run that past such and such a department. I'm going to need to get that signed off. So it's pitching yourself to solving problems, but sometimes you've got to draw out from the customer what those problems actually are, because for a lot of innovative entrepreneurs, they are answering questions that the customer might not even know that they've got, but that they've got those problems, and it's how to have that. So again, unfortunately, my standard answer is there's no one size fits all, but it is surrounding yourself by people who have been, maybe they might be competitors, or they might be someone else who's not a competitor but works in that same space. Make contact with them, buy them lunch, buy them a coffee, just have a conversation and say, the questions that you've just asked us, have that conversation with someone that works in that field. Yeah, because most entrepreneurs want to support others if they're not competitors.
Yeah, because we've kind of skirted about it a little bit, and what I was wanting to ask you both next was this whole pricing v value element. So I was going to ask you both, do you feel that pricing is more important than value at the moment, or how do you kind of balance being competitive with making a profit? I'll start with yourself, Edward, on that one. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a tough one, because I think to price completely based on value requires a sense of credibility and a bit of a track record to really get your price point up to maybe where you think it is. Because I do think it's important that we are charging what we're worth and what we deserve to be charged, whether that's for your products or services or for your time. But you can't do that on day one. And I think it takes a special type of business to be able to have pure confidence to go in at a really disruptive price point, probably a really high price point, as a first starter. So often with startups, there's 3 steps I would say to them in terms of how to figure out where your profit margin should be and where your pricing should be. First one is look internal, map out all the costs, figure out what it actually costs you to run and deliver that service, and make sure you know your numbers inside out, and always account for, especially if it's an early venture, you've not done that piece of work before, a little bit of allowance to know this might take us a little bit more time, or there might be costs we haven't thought of that we haven't done. So figure out what that bottom mark is. Obviously, look externally is the next step, is what are competitors doing? What are other price points looking like? How do we fit in compared to all of those? But then I guess the third step is then not even to look at the number on the pricing sheet, but to look at the value you're creating, or the opportunity you're creating, or the saving you're creating. So particularly in the energy tech space, actually the value can be in not amount saved by not doing a vessel to go offshore to do an inspection, because you've got a novel piece of technology that would replace that entire vessel requiring to go out, or you're going to save 200 man hours worth of time on a piece of work. Well, what is the equivalent of that piece of value? Because actually for the client, you might be solving a problem there they currently don't have in their budget line, but they do have a cost to work in that space. So if it's something where they already have something, then maybe you are just having to be a little bit cheaper than the competitors, and you do have to fit with the market. If you're a startup doing something different, or you're selling to a business who doesn't have this service, then you need to figure out what is in their budget that you would create value or create benefit for, save them time, save them money, save them cost. And actually that's sometimes where the startups can bump up their prices, where they realize, well, actually, if we could save them 10% of their operating costs, if we could save them 200 man hours, that's significantly higher than we would have ever thought to charge. So think about those. And then the final thing I would say is always know that pricing is a spectrum. Not only is that in terms of you and how your business grows, that you might have additional staffing costs next year, or you may have, the market might change and, people don't have as much money. I see it all the time when I used to be in the university. Every year you would have these really passionate students coming in, and they would say, why does it cost so much for this? We could do it so much cheaper. And then you look at it and it's like, well, you've not paid for any staff. You're assuming you're doing it for free. You've not covered VAT. You've not included this. You've not included that. So always allow yourself the flexibility that you don't know everything and you don't know how much things are going to cost. And if you have to, I try to recommend, think of ways. So if you think one day you want to charge at this level, or you think the value you're going to charge is at this level, but you're not there yet, or you don't have the credibility, maybe on your invoice have £1,000 is your fee, but then have a early stage discount or a referral discount, discount it down to the price that the customer would be willing to pay, £200, £500. But that gives you, the customer feels like they've got a deal. You were always going to charge £500 anyway, but instead of just saying £500, you've said 1,000 discounted to 500. They think they've got a better deal, but equally next year when you go back, if you go up a little bit, it doesn't feel as painful. So that's just one example, but think of ways that you're not putting yourself in a box to make it difficult to renegotiate in future, or if a cost comes up that you've not thought of. So those would be my couple of tips around pricing.
Well, that's good tips there. I mean, what about yourself, Steve?
Yeah, I probably because I'm a mechanic to trade, but I use the motor industry as an example for this. If everything was down to price, we would all be driving exactly the same car. So if you're a car salesperson, your product or service. So when my children were young, I wasn't really that bothered about before I was married with children, it was, I want to have a car that looks really cool. When I had children, I wanted a car that was really safe. And I did a lot more research into, I thought I was a safe driver. What is the crumple zone of this car? If something would go wrong, how safe is my family? When my family were older and they were driving, I was then in very nice roles. And I was just like, I'm going to spoil myself a bit. And I'm just going to have a nice, comfy car that's like sitting in an armchair. Now I'm a little bit older still. My car is something for me to put stuff in and get me to the shops and back, or get me to a meeting. And there's also a part of me that says, as a consultant, I don't want to be turning up to a client in a brand new, really highly polished, very expensive car, because they are going to be thinking, am I paying for that car? And going back to my dad, many moons ago, I worked for BT, and the story I tell as often as I possibly can. We were negotiating a deal with a contractor, and the contractor turned up in an old Land Rover and like a donkey jacket and a hard hat, just to say, like, I really know about construction. And someone was saying, like, well, okay, but this is obviously someone who really knows their stuff. We totally engaged with them. It was like, well, do you think they've got the resources to actually do the work? And somebody said, well, if you go back tomorrow, you'll see his Rolls Royce parked outside his house. But what he was just basically doing, his message to us at the first meeting was, yes, I am wealthy, but I know my stuff. Mm-hmm. Somewhere else, if he's talking to investors, etc. But it's using the car market is, if you're selling to a young family a car, it's about security. If you're selling to someone with, who has that more relaxed outlook in life and likes the nice things in life, that's when you might be upselling the product or service. But it's a good general analogy that most people will get when it comes to value propositions against price.
No, that's a really good point. And I'm probably at the family stage at the moment. I went through that stages as well. You're looking at the safe element now and things like that. I like to say a big boot to take stuff to the skip to and everything, all dad duties and things like that. So
and driving a car that you don't really care about, you can really park quite close to the entrance of a supermarket.
Well, if my wife's watching, she'll be laughing at that comment. So no, I just wanted to we've obviously now managed to look at our budgets, right? We've got an understanding of that as an entrepreneur now. Now we're looking at sort of the tools, the digital tools that can help us, and looking to try and do a little bit of smart scaling of our company. Edward, if I can ask you, what are the kind of digital shortcuts or tools that saved you the most time, and certainly in the early days?
Good question, and I think I've got two answers. There's things that are relevant definitely for me, but I guess you can't talk about digital tools without bringing up AI. So that's definitely another area to explore. So I think three themes for me. One, digital tools for organization. So for me, that's some sort of to-do list system, whether that's Notion or Microsoft To Do or Microsoft Planner or Trello. But having, especially if you're in a team, having clear systems in place to know who is responsible for what and when things are getting delivered, especially if you're doing commercial work for externals. Disorganization, post-it notes, scrappy to-do books, you don't want a system that works, but everybody has to be really clear, and you need to set that standard, especially if you're hiring staff. So find a system, make sure you're keeping track of it. The thing that always hit me when I was in university, I ran for student president. And I think that student president political mindset was actually quite powerful for my career operating system, because one, you had to promise what you were going to do before you even got the job. So you had to have a clear plan, almost a strategic plan in terms of here's what you're choosing me for and here's what I'm going to deliver. And it's really simple. Is you voted for me, now I know what I need to do. So how do you start every year with your own sort of organization system of what's your manifesto for what you're going to achieve? And equally, I had to do a monthly report and a monthly video to talk to my constituents and tell them what I'd actually delivered. So I held myself accountable. And I think that mentality of find an organization system to keep you accountable is really powerful, whether that's to do, whether that's something else. So organization's one. The second one is relationships. So I would say that's LinkedIn. It could be some form of customer relationship management CRM system. There's one I've started playing about with called Dex, D-E-X, Get Dex. And what I like about it is that LinkedIn is really good until you can't remember someone's name and you go, I met someone at that, or, I can't remember, or they've changed job or something's happened. So Dex syncs up with your email and syncs up with your LinkedIn. So you've kind of got this personal CRM to kind of keep track of who you're speaking to. And it can also send you reminders as well to say, Ross has just changed job, or somebody has just, changed position or something like that. It can be quite helpful. So maintaining those relationships and building those systems so that when you do need someone who's got expertise in contracts or someone who's been there and done it in finance, you've got this easy to access record is one. So second set of systems is around relationships. And the third one is where this AI comes in, which is around this new thinking and efficiencies. And I don't have a best practice. I'm playing about with loads of them. I'm playing about with Lovable to build systems. I'm playing about with ChatGPT and Copilot at work. But find a set of AI tools. AI is not everything yet. I still think I really like the term Copilot. I think that's a really good way of framing it, because it shouldn't be doing everything for you, and it's not efficient yet, and you still need to be the critical thinker. But having a set of tools where you can just quickly get that brainstorm underway, or you can get even an initial look at contracts analysis, you stick a contract in and you can get some output out of it, could be quite useful. So those would be my kind of 3 digital hacks for systems for young professionals.
I really like that term, career operating system. I like that. I really feel like that's a great way of looking at it. I'll have to make sure I've got my downloaded the latest edition.
I know, I think I'm a few editions behind now, but I'm sure.
Steve, I mean, how important is digital maturity when procurement looks at a supplier? I mean, are they expecting automation, systems, compliance from day one?
Again, if it's back to this, you know, a small company working with a big company, that's where conflict can sometimes happen with expectation. I mean, as far as AI is concerned, and the fear of being replaced, whether you're an individual or a company, is you still need the expertise to feed in the questions, and you still need the expertise to analyze it and figure it out and understand it and use it. But what the technology for me, whether it's AI or a system, is it actually going to save me some type of resource, financial, people, energy, some sort of saving, without the risk of me having to spend even more time going over it again and stuff like that. So I think when it comes to large multinational organizations who are automated, it's going to be very hard to use somebody who hasn't got that technology because of their size. But that shouldn't stop, because that goes back right to the beginning of this session. It's the value proposition, and if a customer really finds the value, it might not be immediate, but they will find a way to integrate it, and they will support you. And it might be, you know, I think when we came into digital twinning, you know, 20, 30 years ago, we were talking about it, and only in the last decade has it really accelerated. But it was still, I still remember working in a procurement role with operational teams, looking at our offshore work that needs to be done, the important work and the less important work, who was going to do it, and all of those things. And now all of a sudden, those months and months of work can now be done in hours, just to get you to a point where you've still got to make a decision. But to get back to the question, does being digitally enhanced help? I'm afraid it goes back to there's no one size fits all. It depends on what the product and service does for the client and the supplier, and how you integrate it without creating more problems that it solves.
No, I mean, I think I was just going to ask you both very quickly a follow-up to that from both your responses. I mean, it's quite clear that you know, a lot of the entrepreneurs might be looking at which systems they should set up before pitching for bigger work. Is there any recommendations that you guys would have? If I could start with yourself, Edward, what would you think?
Yeah, I think focusing in on the pitching piece, whatever presentation software, when I work with startups, I think every startup, when they're doing a pitch, should have 3 versions of the deck that they're going to be sending. The first thing they always need to have as a system is the mega slide pack. This is a slide pack that nobody sees, but it's got every version of every slide you've got. You've got 10 versions of the problem slide. Some are simpler, some are clearer, some are textbooks with annotations. You've got TAM, SOM slides for your startup. You've got team versions of the slide. You've got everything, and no one should ever see that full deck besides your internal team. And then when you get into that pitch meeting, whatever it is, the 2 slide decks you should be dragging out of there is, one, if you're presenting physically, you need a version of the slide deck that is almost like a piece of staging behind you. It is simplified. It is like, if you ever watch an Apple keynote presentation, they never have page numbers and slide titles and logos and lines and branding. You know, it's about the one key story, the one key message, the big, powerful visual. So you need a slide deck that still has the story that you're telling through the session. What is it? The problem? Is it the solution? Is it the benefits? But it should load up one simple image at a time, one simple idea, keep it all clear. But the difficulty with that startups don't like is, I want to send something after the meeting, and if they look at that slide pack, it will make no sense at all because it's just a bunch of pictures. So the second slide deck should be the second version where it does have, it's the PDF version, the little mini textbook version, where if they didn't hear you talk about it at all, they can follow the information. So it's a sort of scripted version of what you said. But if you present with that, with all the information on the slide at once, all the charts, all the text, you're losing the power of your persuasion when you're presenting, because you're giving all the information as a textbook at once. So make sure that you have a simplified version where you include the dramatic effect of saying, here's the benefit, or here's what it is, and let me introduce our team. You give that sort of performance, but you also have the information to follow up. So as a system for presenting, mega deck, presentation deck, and the PDF summary that you send afterwards, which, to be honest, is you probably have that anyway. You know, it's just the kind of company overview or the project proposal or whatever it is that you're sharing. So that'd be my recommendations.
No, that's great. No, thank you for that, Edward. I mean, from like your experience as well, Steve. I mean, you've obviously pitched it a number of times, I'm sure, over the years as well. I'm sure you've probably got a few that are really memorable. Can you maybe just like give us a very brief overview? What's the ones that really stood out for you and why?
Yeah, I mean, so I think whether I'm pitching or I'm seeing a pitch, if there is I just like what Edward's just said about having that stage behind you, because if you've got the story in a picture or a scenario, and then you're comfortable to talk through that really helps, because people want to listen to you without looking at, you know, what's on the screen behind you or something else that's going to take them away. But I think for me also is, depending on the relationship you've got and the ability to challenge, is I will often, certainly if I'm running training or I'm pitching, I will usually ask, is there anybody that have got specific visual ways of learning? Are there dyslexics? Are there anybody that I should be aware of who I'm trying to get engaged with, but they've got a different learning or interpretation style? Again, it's not always that easy a conversation to have, but what I found is, even if there isn't an answer, it shows a respect of the client that you've asked the question, before I present, is there any specific learning styles that you want me to focus on? Because it might just give you a clue that the person who's going to be making the decision is like, I don't want 47 slides. You've got 5 minutes. I want you to be to the point. You can have half an hour of questions and answers, but I just want the pitch to be 5 minutes. Yeah. Or you'll get someone who's a really detailed person, and then you're trying to manage that. And it's, I think the best ones for me are clearly the ones that tune into me quickly are the ones that I enjoy. The ones that don't tune into me, I switch off, and someone else would say, that was great, wasn't it? And I'm like, was it? You know, because we're all different. We're humans. You know.
So I mean, like the last, we're just obviously coming up to the hour mark, and I want to kind of cover like another little last piece with you both, and that was looking at like sort of risks and resilience. If I can ask you, Edward, I mean, what's been your biggest oh crap moment as a founder, and how did you kind of handle it?
I'll try and run through quickly, but back when I was in high school, my first big venture was setting up this clean water charity project. And I remember I was probably about 14 at the time. And I remember it was a school project, research one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I was living in Dubai at the time. So every time I was going to school, I was driving past golf courses where there was sprinklers going off all day. And I was researching this water crisis that was happening. And I knew we wanted to do something. So I had this bold idea. I wanted to go into the headmaster's office, and I was going to do a big World Water Day. We were going to do a full-on carnival. We were going to take over the back of the school, put up inflatables. And somehow they said yes, which was great. I did not expect that. But the first year, a pilot year, went relatively well. But the second year, I had this overconfidence in the first year had went well. People had come along to it. I just assumed that because people knew about it, they would come the second year. So I did everything the same, but I had this over arrogance. I undersold it. I didn't put in as much effort into the selling because I thought I'd already nailed it, and hardly anybody came. I was standing in the middle of that field with all these inflatables and hardly anyone there. It was not enough people. And I really learned that complacency. You have to maintain what you're doing. You have to continue to talk to your customers. They won't stay loyal to you. You have to continue to engage with them. And thankfully, the year after that, I put everything in it. I went on the radio. I went to other schools. I went into every single classroom in the school to talk about it. I had massive banners up outside the school. I quadrupled the effort that I put into, and it was significantly more busier. I think we made around £20,000 that day for clean water charities. And it really did take that, oh my God. And I wanted to fail. I really felt like a complete failure. I wanted to give up on that day when nobody came. But building from that resilience and building a plan and being able to deal with it eventually hopefully leads to more success. So that would be my, oh shit moment would be make sure you are promoting what you're selling and don't assume that just because you post one thing on Facebook that someone will come and someone will buy it.
Yeah, no, great advice as always. I mean, I was going to ask you too, Steve. I mean, what risks make procurement managers lose sleep? Do they sleep?
Well, yeah.
and how can a small supplier ease those worries?
I'm only 27. There's two things that spring to mind. I remember a good few years ago, I was working as part of a small business that grew very quickly, and I was trying to put in a procurement, materials management, supply chain system, and I'd spec something. The financial director said, "You don't need all of that," and I said, "But I'm building this for the next 5 or 10 years." And he was so basically he gave me 20% of the budget that I was asking for. I should have stood my ground. I put in a system that I was allowed to spend money on. And then 10 years later, I'm in a bar in Aberdeen. I see someone that I recognize it. "Oh yeah, you used to work with me at such and such. You're the guy that put in that crap computer system, aren't you?" And that was like, that's a legacy of, not being strong enough, not being confident, because you feel under that pressure. But the thing that always kept me awake as a procurement person and with my operational counterpart was selecting the wrong supplier, because you might have gone on price when you should have gone on value. You might have gone on, it looks really good, but when it comes to the deliverables, did we do enough checks and balances? And choosing the wrong supplier to place an order with is what I would say would keep up most. So if you are that right supplier, please bear with us if we come across as being very questioning and very cynical about what it is that you do. It's just that we've got a history of getting things wrong. We're trying not to do it again. That's what's driving that behavior. So bear with us.
Yeah. No, it's again the last question I want to ask you both tonight, and just to really kind of sum everything up that we've spoken about tonight. I'll start with you, Edward. What's been kind of the toughest part of balancing ambition with reality when you're starting up?
I'd say for me, it's around focus. The passion that entrepreneurs have is really important because it's such a difficult thing that you're doing, but it is also easy to get distracted. Every customer will have a new point of view. Every feature that you design will have 10 different ways of doing things. You'll have thousands of different ideas every single day and thousands of problems that will stop you. So trying to stay focused, knowing and recognizing the wins when you've got them, having those systems where you can tick off what you've achieved so that you are moving forward rather than getting stuck in lots of different directions. So I think staying focused is hard, but having the right systems, having someone who can help you along the way, people to guide you and support you is important to make sure that you get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, brilliant. What about yourself, Steve?
Yeah, I think, there's that age-old adage of like, you don't run before you can walk. But a lot of us, we were crawling, then we were standing up, then we were walking before we could run. And I think for me, when I set up Paratus, I wanted to give back and help businesses and run a business at the same time. And one of the things for me was, and I speak totally from experience here, is I was actually trying to think I can actually help people, but some people don't know what they don't know. And for other people, it's just realizing that as much as you've got a game changer of a product or service, unless the person who you feel could benefit from that service understands that they can benefit from that service, you're never going to get anywhere. And that's where the difference between BD and sales, building up the relationships in BD, get that understanding, then going for the sale, then going for at the same time, what are my exposures? And what happens if I get it wrong? And there is nothing in the world as strong as imposter syndrome. Just at the point where you think I've got this, and all of a sudden it's, what if it goes wrong? What if it goes wrong? What if it goes wrong? And you've just got to deal with that and remind yourself and surround yourself with the people that are supporters. And I'm not just talking about, it's a great idea. It's your supporters are the ones that go, well, hang on a minute, slow up. Yeah. Be very careful about this, because support comes in so many different ways. But that for me is just, from ambition to reality, is the hurt of when it doesn't work out how you want it to work out. But remember why you're doing it in the first place. Because as Ed was just saying right at the beginning, you've done your homework, you've established that this is something that can work. Just make sure you're getting the standing up, crawling, walking, running in the right pace.
Well, gents, that's us now reached the hour. So
Wow.
great timing. I mean, it flies by, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, I want to say, thank you both for, bringing your own insights into tonight's topic. And, how can the AYP team get, our members get in touch with you, Steve? Start with yourself. How can they, keep the conversation going? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, through LinkedIn, I'm on that AYP page. I'll often, when I'm running workshops, say, "No, here's your 20% discount as an AYP member," and some people have utilised that. But reach out to me, and of course, if anybody's looking for mentoring or stuff like that, I know you run the mentoring program. Just contact me. If I can, I genuinely will help anybody that I can.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Steve. And I will plug your course as well, because I've been on it and it is brilliant. You don't have to be, like a supply chain guy, a contract. I mean, it's really commercially makes you fully aware, and I think it's a great thing to attend. If you don't have the word commercial or supply chain or contracts manager in your job title, I think it's a really, really good course to attend. And so thank you for supporting us on that in the group as well, Steve. Appreciate it. What about yourself, Edward?
Yeah, and just a thank you to yourselves and AYP. I've had a AYP mentor, I think, for 2-ish years now. And, in hurdles and challenges, it's been really valuable to have that input and sounding board. So I appreciate it. So yes, just feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with people through that. So just Edward Pollock, and happy to answer any questions people have got as well. Thank you so much.
Well, that's great, guys. Well, thank you very much. I'll just say good night to you both, and I'll just close up tonight. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you again.
Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Well, another great AYP Live. And just a reminder that our next event is the infamous AYP Ball. And I want to say well done to the committee for getting this across the line so quickly, especially in tandem when we had the 30 under 30. And it's totally sold out. And the committee are really looking forward to welcoming you along for a night of celebration and networking, and also raising a few quid for our chosen charities, Prostate Cancer UK and Maggie's Centre. So please give generously if you're going along to the event, because I was really honoured that the committee agreed to support both those charities, as my dad is kind of recovering from prostate cancer himself. So it would mean a lot. Tonight, well, what can I do to sum that up? I mean, I think we've got a lot to take away, and I think a lot of people will be watching this back as well. But here's my kind of takeaway. And I think it's about starting a business is exciting, but it's also risky. And I think you've got to dream big, like Edward, but you've also need the discipline to protect yourself with solid contracts and smart supply strategies, just like Steve. So the lesson, innovation without structure is chaos, and contracts without courage is useless. But put the two together and you've got a business that's not just surviving, but competing. So until next time, keep building, keep learning, and remember, sometimes the best deal is the one you don't sign. And as always, keep an eye out for the next AYP Live via our socials. And if you want to get involved or nominate someone with an inspiring story, please drop us an email at info@aypgroup.co.uk. So thanks again for joining us on AYP Live, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheerio. Thanks for tuning in to Aberdeen Young Professionals. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more events. Want to join us in person? Visit www.aypgroup.co.uk to find out what's next. See you there.